Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my podcast, A Woman of Leisure podcast, on Substack, Spotify, YouTube, wherever this podcast may land. I'm calling this A Woman of Leisure because I believe that Gen X women, we really need to redefine how we how we think about leisure. Leisure is not laziness. Leisure is strategy. Leisure is agency. So, without further ado, today is my fourth episode, I believe, and I wanted to talk about why I left New York. As you can see, I'm wearing one of my favorite colors, and I do so because it's just really got my creativity and my memory just firing at all four cylinders, all five cylinders, whatever. So, my parents met in the early 70s while they were students at Columbia University. I believe it was my father's senior year, and I was born in Harlem Hospital. So I was born in Harlem Hospital, but my formative years of growing up, where my memory is really just exploding with color and imagery, took place in the Bronx. We moved into the Bronx in the early 80s. I want to say it was 81, 82, where I was between the ages of like 7 to 13, no, 8 to 13, something like that. It was like between the ages of 8 years old and 13. So it was that time where I was really transitioning. I went through that transition of being a child into an adolescent. So, wow, so much is coming to my brain. We lived on the Grand Concourse, just a couple of blocks away from Kingsbridge Road. We had a two-bedroom apartment with parquet floors on the fifth floor and French doors. It was at a time when the area was still very diversified prior to any types of gentrification. I remember there was a butcher shop. Nobody goes to butchers anymore. Butchers don't exist too much anymore in New York City, or at least not the way they used to. Here, butchers are very much a part of the culture. But there was a local butcher, and as a matter of fact, his name was Leo. It's coming to my mind. His name was Leo, and he owned the place. He ran the place. He knew everybody by name. We knew him by name, as well as many other numerous, countless, overstocked gifts and souvenir shops that were just bustling with cheap things, like everything from, remember those stylish, colorful jelly sandals that all the girls would wear, and all the girls would boast, oh, I've got those in 9 colors and 12 colors, whatever, which are horrible for your feet, just not really good shoes. Had those colorful bandanas, everything that marked the trendiness of the early 80s. I remember all the candy stores and wonderful actual eat-in restaurants, everything from the Chinese restaurants, and I'm not talking about fast food Chinese restaurants. I'm talking about Chinese restaurants where you sit down with a linen tablecloth and they bring the food to you and literally on a stainless steel platter with a lid, very elegant. Then next door there was a Colombian restaurant, and so many different flavors on one block. And then there was the pizza restaurant. There was the pizza shop where you can buy a slice of pizza for something like 50 cents or whatnot. Yeah, I'm old, okay? So, and I am happy to be old because I have these memories. And then I also recall in the summertime, the side street along our building was blocked off for a play street for the kids where they would play stickball in the summertime. And then you would go a couple of blocks up to Fordham Road, which was the cultural commercial epicenter of the neighborhood. At the time, the department store there was Alexander's, and I recall buying my first pair of Gitano jeans. They're my first pair of grown-up jeans there, and also my first bra. And along on the outside, the other streets, the other neighboring streets were more countless discount stores, everything from like bagman stores to Oh my gosh. See, and I'm recalling all these different names or whatnot. I remember going in and buying Christmas presents, those crazy jewelry boxes that were doubled as jewelry boxes and music boxes at the same time that would break. They would cost like $5, and then they'd break after 3 months or something like that. I recall up there by Fordham Road, there was just before, well, right around Fordham Road, there was Poe Cottage, the refuge of Edgar Allan Poe. So we would tour Poe Cottage, and that was by definition called Poe Park. There was a little, what do you call that? A little spotlight there. There was always neighborhood kids around there who were breakdancing or whatnot. Or on each corner there was somebody selling. There was a cart selling Italian ices for 50 cents. You get like 2 or 3 scoops of Italian ices for 50 cents. And then on that corner was a very famous funeral home. I'll leave it at that. And then around the corner from that there were, I recall, four large movie theaters. Lowe's was the main one. Okay, Lowe's was the main one, just like 1 block away from Fordham Road. I think it was on Fordham Road. It's difficult to tell, but on the Grand Concourse. And it was clear that now that I'm older and I understand a little bit more about architecture. It had all the markings of a former burlesque theater. It was huge, it was majestic. All those huge Romanesque, elaborate brocade fixtures, those huge, uh, majestic sculptures, female sculptures on the wall, that huge, big golden marquee, those huge, gigantic, heavy, thick red velvet curtains that fell to the ground that always seemed dirty but yet somehow still very romantic. There was another theater that was Lowe's. Then there was another theater, like 2 blocks away, just off Fordham Road. There was the Valentine. That's the one I recall. The Valentine, which was a little bit more newer, a little bit more updated. There was RKO, and another one which is fading into the back of my mind, but that's the major. That's it. I recall seeing some classic '80s classic movies in those theaters. Number one being The Last Dragon, of course. Who can forget that incredible movie? Breakin', Beat Street, all of those '80s classic movies that defined or helped define an era, helped define fashion, helped define a culture. I recall those huge boom boxes where every now and again you get these guys walking down the street with this huge boom box on their shoulder, and each guy, it was almost like a competition who had the biggest boom box, who had the most elaborate boom box, and of course they were all outfitted with keychains and bandanas and colors and things of that nature. Just this beautiful self expression. And this was when guys still wore their pants with belts or above on their hips, if you know what I mean. So there was that. I recall, oh my gosh, so much. I recall buying cheap gifts from all of these no name souvenir stores that were just overstocked with a lot of low quality stuff. But it was pretty. It was pretty. It was that type of innocence. It was that type of fun. Whenever I would have my allowance or whatnot, I would go buy myself a Cupid doll. I would go buy myself a hair barrette, whatever the case may be, or maybe birthday presents for friends. My school, I recall catching the school bus just outside, well, depending on the year, just outside the apartment building. And my brother, my sister, and I, we all went to a small charter school in the Bronx that seemed to change location almost every single year. mainly because it was a small charter school. So we changed location every single year, and we were in some of the most burnt out sections of the Bronx. Yes, that time when the Bronx, almost every corner, at least in that, almost every corner was just this pile of rubble. Okay, now we lived on the concourse, so we didn't see that too much, but that came later. I remember going to McDonald's and getting our twice monthly treat of a Happy Meal by the Armory over there, just off, maybe a couple of blocks away from Fordham Road, right by, was it Fordham University, or I think it was Fordham University. There's a college over there. So yeah, I just, it's just blowing my brain. So, and then I recall, as an adult, okay, fast forward, as an adult, I pursued theatrical dancing as professional theatrical dancing. And after my first union job, and I was so excited to come back to New York because, as you might imagine, on a bus and truck tour, you're in some places like we were in Amish Town, Pennsylvania. We were up in the Poconos, places that aren't obscure, but places I had never been before. So it was just really nice to come back to New York, to be back into a space that was familiar and textured. So it was my first couple of days back. I think it was my first weekend. And I met up with a friend to just take a walk through Central Park. That's all I wanted to do, was just absorb New York. Okay. So we're walking through Central Park, and we were on the Central Park west side of the park. And it was early June. It wasn't quite too hot just yet. We're walking, whatnot. And we're still young, we're not, overly made up or anything like that. And there was a man, a grown man, sitting on the park bench, right? And he was casual, right? He was wearing like fresh pressed jeans, sneakers, a very crisp white shirt, rolled up rolled up cuffs, arms stretched out, just kind of chilling out, sunglasses, and he had a nice watch on. That's all I recall. And he was just relaxing, kind of like the way we were, just relaxing and enjoying the day. And and I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, this man looks familiar, but we're New Yorkers, so there's a secret code amongst New Yorkers. You kind of respect people's space, particularly people who are well known, if you know what I mean. So we're walking, and he makes eye contact, and he's got this big, huge, friendly smile. He's looking at me as if he can tell that I recognize him, but I'm also thinking, be cool, be cool. So he's smiling at me as if to say it's okay to say hello. So we just keep walking, and I just smiled, and we just keep walking. As soon as we got out of earshot, I said to my friend, I said, "Was that?" And she said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was." But that's the way New York was, or that's the way New York is. You are in such proximity with so many people and things and creators whom in other parts of the world, or even other parts of the country, are resigned to billboards or images in a magazine. But these are people that you're just going, you're likely to run into at the grocery store, at the public bathroom, at the airport, in the park. And I guess, now that I think about it, I guess there is something very stimulating about being in proximity with that level of affluence. Okay, affluence, I'll just say that. And so then, as I lived in New York, and I lived in different neighborhoods in New York, one of my favorites was Chelsea. The Chelsea, what's that other area? I'm drawing a blank now. Basically, Chelsea area. And I remember going into, this was in the early mid 90s era. Okay. I remember partying at the tunnel. I remember partying at the tunnel. Save the Robots. Now, Save the Robots was where you went after the clubs closed. That was the after hour spot. When you came out to Save the Robots, the sun was overhead. I mean, everybody was going about their day. Okay. So there was Save the Robots, the tunnel, Webster Hall. I remember going to a couple of concerts and partying there. Oh, and Nels. Oh my God, Nels. Nels was Oh, Nels was gorgeous. I loved Nels. Nels it was in a Victorian townhouse that had been, it was an old remodeled Victorian townhouse, and it had that old Victorian feel with the oriental rugs and the hardwood floors and the porcelain sinks and things of that nature. Oh my god, so just it just felt rich, but in a new way, if you get what I'm saying, but not in a stuffy way. At least that's my vibe. I've always been a fan of Art Deco and vintage architecture. So we would go there and we would see concerts and jazz clubs or whatnot. There was open mic night. Another celebrity sighting, I was at another one of my favorite well, it's not a speakeasy, but it's one of those music clubs in the village. And I was there with some friends, probably might have been my first time there or whatnot. Low ceilings, loose wires everywhere, but the musicians were outstanding. And the guys on stage, and it was one of those places where the tables are really, really close together or whatnot. And the guys on stage, he's singing or whatnot. And the stage was relatively low. It was only like what seemed like not even like 6 inches above myself, right? So the guy reaches down and he just reaches down. You don't see what he's doing. He reaches down and he pulls up this tiny image. Okay. And again, it's dark, whatever. I see this outline. He pulls up this woman who's barely 5 feet tall, this hair that is just out of this world. And she grabbed them and she just toe it up, if you know what I mean. She toe it up. And I'm like, that's a legend. This is a legend, okay? Legend, for whatever reason. I'm not going to say the name because I don't want any problems or whatnot. She is a legend, okay? Of the era, of the time in music. If you know, you know, okay? Like I said, she's like 4'7". Hair is just bigger than she is. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And then I recall going to not even the diners after clubbing, having breakfast, omelets, things of that nature, to absorb all the alcohol before we went on with our lives. I remember Gray's Papaya, where you can buy a hot dog for 99 cents with sauerkraut and onions, my favorite way to eat a hot dog. I remember all of these things. So moving forward, at the end of this, well, not the end, but as I grew up and worked and started to create a reputation for myself, professional reputation for myself. And I developed a work portfolio, but I hustled, okay? Like I said, 16, 18-hour days. And I was working at I had a simple job, right? It was still full time, but it was simple. I worked at the makeup counter, okay? But I did that because it fit beautifully in between my real money as a yoga teacher. And that doesn't sound very lucrative, but I have a motto: if you're going to do something, do it big. Hence why I moved to the south of France. I had a teaching job at, oh my gosh, New School University. Okay, so yes, I was on teaching faculty, and the pay was very good. Okay, that's all I'm going to say is that one paycheck paid my rent. Okay, so that's what I loved about New York, is that there were resources available for whatever it is you wanted to do. Now, it doesn't mean it was always easy, but the possibilities were always there. So I had amassed a certain amount of income because I was hustling. And the income that I amassed, it was like I would have left New York earlier had I not had those opportunities. Not that I couldn't get out of them. It was just a question of, no, you have worked this hard to get to this place. Now is not the time. At least now is the time to use those resources. So I did. And when those things started to peel away, I said, wow, I'm free. And as that income peeled away, I came into the financial resources to start spreading my wings. So, in short, I left New York. Oh, that's hot. Because she had given me what I needed and I was ready to move on. Okay. And New York taught me resilience. New York taught me creativity. New York taught me ambition, things that are still within my DNA. And I realized they're not going to leave. It gave me the confidence to know that wherever I go, I got it. So, with that, and as you know, my story goes that I came here to learn. My marriage was a beautiful surprise. That was not the goal. But now that I'm here, I'm learning the art of slow living. Doesn't mean I don't hustle. Doesn't mean I've lost my ambition or my creativity. It just means that I go about it a little differently, in a way that I can savor, in a way that I can marinate, in a way that I can enjoy. Hence, the Woman of Leisure podcast. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And thank you for hanging in there with my bare face, whatever. Today just was not the day for makeup. So, my husband will be home in a minute, and we're probably going to take a walk along the beach this evening. I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, a tout à l'heure. Thank you for listening. I'll see you soon.